think in Tengerism there are different versions of it depending where you are. Humans are supposed to have 3 souls at least, maybe 5, of which 1 is mortal and 2 are immortal. So you will be reborn with the soul that you have in this life. So there's a different way of dealing with conflict, because that's really what it means. You know, I don't know if any of us will be reborn, maybe not. Sometimes I want to believe it, sometimes I think it's impossible. But already thinking this way helps you live your life, this life, much differently than when you're in fear to be burning in hell forever or something like that. So there's a different kind of perspective on future, which also is, you know, you see that in the way animals are treated in Mongolia, because animals also have a soul. And so you need to treat them in a good way. And if you kill them because you need food, you already, you know, you have to respect that. You have to be respectful in the way you treat the animals. And this has a totally different aspect to it. This again, it's actually good to have these 2 paintings now. That brings me to contemporary political situation in Mongolia. Those 2 paintings from by Batazorik I chose because they show the 2 different aspects that fight in contemporary Mongolian politics. On the right, you have, both are painted on wooden panels from traditional boxes that nomads would take with them. So they have all their belongings in these boxes. So the patterns, some of them are, you know, from the board, the traditional, and then he paints on them. On the right-hand side, you have the wolf, which is a, you know, can be a soul animal, but is also, you know, a dangerous animal. But, you know, it definitely represents forces of nature, and there are all these like lights surrounding this. But interesting is the structure above that's kind of in that pink outline. This is the parliament building of Mongolia in Ulaanbaatar in the way it looked like during communist times. So that's the Communist Party represented in that painting. On the left-hand side, you have Buddha with an evil Mickey Mouse head. So that's the capitalist side of Mongolia. Those are the ones that, you know, that try to exploit the earth. You know, they start digging everywhere. And maybe now is a good time to talk a little bit about what nomadic life is or used to be in Mongolia. Our romanticized Western idea of nomads is they're there, you know, they camp, they have the yurt, and they have everything. And then one day they decide, okay, you know, maybe not enough grass, let's move some other place. And then you just move around at will. But that's not at all what happens. What happens is that every clan, they have a very clear summer camp and a very clear winter camp where they go. And depending on the climate in the different parts of Mongolia, they have 2 camps, or they have up to 4 camps, depending on the season. Because those are the places that sustain them and their animals. And all the other nomads know about this as well. So there's no conflict, because they're not like, hey, this is, you know, I'm bringing my herds here now. No, they know exactly where they're going to be, and their families, their clans have been there for hundreds of years. Now, miners come in and they dig open the earth where they think there is gold, copper, coal, and, you know, those are the most uranium, those are the most common things that they're looking for. And they just go to places where there's already a clan that is their land. But of course, there is no title of property. You know, they don't own the land. In Mongolia, you don't own land, or you didn't. Now, as as a nomad, when you go to Ulaanbaatar, you have the right to get a certain amount of land somewhere. You can build something, you can build a fence around, and then you start becoming like a city person. But the conflict in the steppes is very clear and sometimes very brutal. And there were some beautiful films about that in Berlinale in the past 5-6 years. Ader in der Welt, for example. Forgot the English title. It's very good to understand what conflicts there are. And then, they meet, those clans meet, they try to go to the politicians, say, you can't do this to us, this is our land. And so there's constant fight in the parliament about those things. So the one side, they try to make nomadic life stronger by, for about 20 years now, nomadic life has become a intangible, UNESCO protected right or something. So there's enough political force to kind of push against the Mickey Mouse capitalists. And but this is unresolved, and it will be unresolved for a very, very long time. Also, nomadic life is becoming more and more modern, of course. I mean, every nomad has a cell phone, and it's quite, surprising. We were in a camp, close to his family, and we're there. You see nothing, just like maybe some gears over there, and lots of animals, but nothing else, no building. And then you pull out your phone, and there is a little bit of reception. I have no idea where that came from. So, and there's another government program right now. It's kind of interesting. Should you ever fly to Mongolia with MIA, the Mongolian airline, look into this, the sleeve and the seat in front of you. There's this in-flight magazine, which is pretty much run by the government. Everything they have, its program, they report about this there. So when I was flying once, they said, oh yeah, we want to enhance nomadic life, and there are different ways of income stream. So now they encourage tourism to the steppes, and a lot of Koreans actually are coming, and what they do is they adopt a sheep, for example. They go there, they pay some money to adopt a sheep, and then the nomad sends them images of their sheep once a week on Facebook. Yeah? So this is why the whole project is also called Post-Nomadic, because of course, everything that we can know about the world enters every little spot in the world. Everybody knows about what is there and what's possible. And that's very different from, say, 20 years ago when you didn't have any cell phones or no internet. So that really changes a lot in how people think about themselves. But I think all of you have lived in the countryside when you were little, right? When you were kids. Yes. Because that's what mostly happens. Parents that already live in Ulaanbaatar, they're mostly young, they're very busy. Grandparents still in the countryside, so the kids go there for a couple of years until they have to go to school. Then either they come to their parents' place or they go to boarding school and to learn how to read, write, and what have you. And then most of the time, it's the boys that get called back to the countryside to help with, nomadic life. And the girls stay in school, so they get better education. That's also an interesting dynamic within Mongolia right now. That there's something that young women actually have it's an advantage to them. And so that's another view into the exhibition. So here you see the nomad, if it's clear enough for you. And again, there are these 3 gas masks by Nomin Bold, and they have both elements. They have skulls, sort of lamized skulls, but they also have some symbolic keys back here. And the keys are part of shamanic rituals. Those are there to unlock other worlds that are otherwise not accessible. And what we brought from Ulaanbaatar, from her studio, were just the gas masks, and then I was supposed to put them on some metal rod, but they came and they found all these like forks, Mistgabeln, and it was of course perfect, and those forks are curved a little bit, so they looked a little bit like toy horses to ride on. And, but the aspect of the gas mask is quite serious, because Ulaanbaatar has about the worst air you can imagine in the world. It's worse than Beijing 10 years ago. And every year 400 children die just of bad air, children under 12. And then many more die, of course, but it's a real disaster. And it has to do with, again, they sell the good coal they have to China, and they use the bad one to fuel their power plants, and there's no real filtration or anything. All the cars you see in Ulaanbaatar, they don't have the catalysator, the catalyst inside anymore. Before they get, and they're mostly imported cars from Japan, Korea, other countries, because you see cars that have left or right steering, all mixed in between, and they don't have this filter. So the air is really catastrophically bad in Ulaanbaatar, and that is sort of part of Nomen's protest against that. And so when you see that, Batatzorik's work, her work, you see that this is also politically engaged art. They really interact with their country, with their society. And then, of course, in Lama Buddhism, you always have a third eye or something. This is quite surprising to see that in a Penck painting as well. And Penck, by the way, always refused when people try to compare his work to cave paintings. No, I'm not doing cave paintings. Why? I think he didn't want to fall into the Joseph Beuys trap. He wanted to make clear that this was work about modern society, but he had a sense of that modern society is more than just sociology. There's a different aspect. There's a human aspect, there's a metaphysical aspect, there's a violent aspect. All these things play out in his work. So I'm trying to kind of change German art history a little bit in that respect. I hope somebody would listen to this, because we could learn a lot more from Penck than we can learn from Beuys, I think. I mean, he was an interesting artist, but that's another discussion. I'm not going to go into this now. Also other, views of the exhibition. This is, of course, Gerehu Gambold that you saw upstairs already. This is an interesting work by Berlin artist Nadine Rennert. She was born in Neustadt an der Rheinstraße, but really grew up in Berlin. So she is really a city person, but she has a deep connection to forces of nature. She spent quite some time in South Korea, where there's also still shamanistic traditions that are alive. She goes to the Alps, she goes to different mountains. She was trying to follow a bear in the mountains just to feel his presence. And she made this figure out of paper mache. And when our Mongolian friends came in to the gallery, they saw this work, it was like, what? This is a German artist? Because it looks a little bit like Dermis, right? There's a strong connection to Mongolian artists. There's one artist who has two paintings upstairs. He has all these like in-between figures of humans with horns and animals. So you know that there's some animal spirit that also lives in humans. And in the case from Nadine's case, it is really a little bit the same. And when you see, and it's a life-size sculpture, when you see this, it looks much more solid than paper mache. And when you walk around in the space, then you realize it's not a figure with two faces, but it's a figure that has changed, turned her head for a moment. So there's this one state when she looks to her right and she holds the hare, the rabbit. It's a different aspect than when she turns left and she becomes an animal herself. So from huntress to being hunted. That is sort of the moment where her inner feeling changes. And you know, if any of you have ever killed an animal, I've killed some fish, and I had to help kill some rabbits when I was a boy. You have a feeling that there's something happening inside you, and she knows about this feeling, and that was quite interesting to see how, you know, even us having grown up in an industrial environment, there's still some sort of connection to nature if we want to find it. And and she then became best friends with one of the grand old ladies in Mongolian art, Badam Dashtondog. She's kind of somebody that everybody looks up to. She's very well accomplished, and is a shaman herself, and we'll see some photos later. This is the contrast. Those are paintings by Franz Ackermann. Franz, those were actually paintings he made for an exhibition in Japan, because he hadn't been in Mongolia yet. Franz built his entire artistic career on traveling. So he graduated from art school, and the first thing he did with a DAD grant, he went to Asia for almost 9 months or so, flew into Hong Kong and then Southeast Asia, then back into China, Shanghai, Xi'an, Beijing, and then up into Russia, and then took the Trans-Siberian Railway home. And so he's kind of the Western nomad. All his works, he develops traveling. And he travels with a camera and with small watercolor paper, 13 by 19 centimeters. This is what you brought back. And so he sits there and makes his little paintings. And then when he's home, he makes larger paintings and installations from that. And what he tries to find out, let me put it that way, he makes paintings inspired from where he is. So he sees something and becomes an element of it. And he takes some photos. And then what you can't see on this screen is that there's a layer of painting, and then there are holes cut into this. And behind the holes are photographs, mostly color photographs, sometimes black and white, of locations he's been to. And then you realize those photos, they look totally blank. You can't see anything. There's no sensation, there's no feeling towards them. And very often you know yourself, you take a photo and you know, oh, this was such a great place, and you take photos, you come back home and you look at these photos and you think, oh yeah, that was great, and you show it to a friend and they say, okay. Your memory is much stronger than the photo, so you need that to kind of remember what it is, but the feeling is inside you, right? And then you project it onto the photo. But then for a third person, it's difficult. So that's what he does. He takes those, what Roland Barthes, photography philosopher, would have called sort of punctum, you know, that moment where a photo was taken, and then he creates the energy around it by using paint. But he is sort of the solo traveler, usually. You know, it was sort of an exception that he came to a camp with us for 3 weeks, but most of the time it's him alone going somewhere, making work, and then come back home. And that is one aspect that I think is also very interesting in the project, because about 20 years ago, every artist in the West started talking about him or herself as a nomad. Oh, I'm a nomadic artist. Why? Because I can take a plane and I fly to some place and I'm there for a week and then I come back home, which is bizarre, because when you're there for a week, where are you? Are you really somewhere, or are you just in a hotel? You know, what is the experience that you make when you're there? So when I started talking with Batzai Khan about our camp in Mongolia, he said, oh yeah, we can take you around, we can take you to this place, this place, this place, we stay everywhere for 3 days, and you know, there'll be nice places. I said, no, I don't want this. I want a simple place with no electricity and no running water, and I want us to stay there for 3 weeks. And all the artists from the West that want to join, they have to know and accept this, because it takes time to actually arrive somewhere. And I think in that respect, we made the right decision to, you know, experience much more what it is about. Even though 3 weeks is not a lot of time, but you get more sense of what's going on. Plus, we were living with a family. They cooked for us. You know, we were there constantly. We saw the goat that was taken from the herd, and then the goat was there. And basically, the horns were kind of tied to the car for the day, and then there was the moment where the animal had to die, and then next thing you know, it's in your soup. And so it's very real. Yeah, it's real in a good way, in a way that you cannot experience it in Germany anymore, because all we do, we go to the supermarket and buy stuff, and that's it. So I had those two aspects in the project as well. Oh, here's some more photos about Nadine's work. And, you know, she even has the skulls in there, and you know, so you wonder why is that. But I don't know, some of those things might just be archetypal. You know, this is something that is deeply ingrained in human nature, and it can come out if somebody opens up to it. Again, Gerehu, maybe also one sentence to this work. Those are warriors, like warriors in different actions, and mostly they don't really have a face. They have a mask, or they have something like a head, but no eyes, nose, mouth, or something. Yet, each of those drawings represents one real person from his life. A person he remembers as a child, a person he remembers as a fellow artist, or a person he remembers from his family, and he knows exactly who is behind that. So he's quite of an imaginative artist who thinks in that Mongolian way of presenting personalities via those, what is that? How would I describe that? Those, you know, imaginary warriors.
Yeah.
So, and but it's also very personal for him at the same time. So it's not like I'm going to make a cool manga warrior and I'm going to sell it. No, there's a connection to each of them, in a personal connection. And that's another really big painting by him. It's more than 6 meters, 6 meters 60 to be precise. And I choose this to represent the third really important aspect of art in Mongolia right now. What you see, there are a lot of warriors on horses again, and they're put into little boxes, and those boxes are connected via little lines, so it looks like an info box, like a flow chart, like a modern flow chart in a way. And those white boxes, they're filled with mathematical, physical or chemical formula. So there's a lot of modern science in those boxes, and you wonder why, you know, this is not Mongolian necessarily, but why is it in there? And then they write from right to left, from east to west, and which Genghis Khan did, I guess. And there's one little white box that is kind of indicative of what that might mean. And it has the numbers 10, 100, 1,000, and 10,000. And this is how Genghis Khan changed Mongolian culture when he was able to kind of forge this big Mongolian empire. by pretty much strong-handing all the other clans into a union with brute force, but also with, I think, superior arguments. And so in order to kind of build a structure that is no longer clan-based, he divided all the troops into groups of 10, 100, 1,000, 10,000. And then he could deploy them. He organized a postal system by which he could send a letter from the Chinese Sea to the European border in about 10 days. And so he always knew what was happening in that huge empire. Not only him, I mean his family afterwards. So he radically modernized the medieval society of Mongolia, and he built a city, Karakorum, and this was divided into 4 quarters, and there was a synagogue, a Christian church, there was a mosque, and so you had people from everywhere within his empire, and he would listen to them. If he had a question, he would call them and say, what do you think about this? What do you know about this? He even had a French sculptor there, who I think I'll show this photograph later. So he built the first libraries, and they built astrolabs to kind of understand how the heavens would work, and introduced basically modern science in a proto kind of way. So that was the reason why Mongolian society could be so successful. So within Mongolian society, all conflict had stopped. The clans fighting each other, that didn't happen anymore. So there was rather civilized. To the outside world, to us Europeans, we were very much afraid of them because they came in and were brutal, we thought. So there's a different perspective on Genghis Khan from our end to when you come from a Mongolian society. Now, when you remember the 2 paintings by Badazorik before about the communist and the capitalist forces, and there's a lot of fighting, there's a lot of corruption also in Mongolian politics. Of the 32 Mongolian mines that exist, I think 60% belong to 3 former presidents of Mongolia, just to give you sort of an idea of what that really means. So I think a lot of people in Mongolia, they would like to have a structure that is more stable, that is more dependable. And for a lot of people, Genghis Khan is the person who could bring that to Mongolian society. That's why today, this is actually something they want to aspire to again. So I was looking at this painting for a long time because I had it up for more than 6 months. And it became more and more important to me because you have all these details, and again, no faces on those warriors. And there was another tanka to the left of it, and you have to know one thing about tanka painting. There's a special, there's one monk trained in tanka painting, so he paints for months to finish it almost. And when he's almost finished, more monks come together and they sing together, they pray together, and while they sing and pray, he paints the faces into the tanka. And when the faces are painted, then it's no longer painting, it represents the order. So the fact that there's no faces on there means this place is not in order yet. That's kind of what I see from that painting. And then you realize, and it's very difficult to see here, there's this brown-red background. It's like chaotic. And then you realize, that's why Gerehu painted it, because he wanted to put something structured in front of that chaos that is everywhere in Mongolia. You don't know brown, red. Is it boiling? Is it hot? What is it? Is it decaying? So this is pretty much a very strong painting about the reality of Mongolia today. And that's why I choose that. So you have these three aspects, and I haven't really talked about Lama Buddhism enough. Oh, let me go to Ingzaya first. She's the wife of Gerehu. Very often you have husband and wife. I mean, almost all the artists here, they,
Couple.
man and woman, they're both artists. In the West, this mostly doesn't work. So, one is the artist, one is successful, the other one is angry, all the time, and then they separate. But differently there, and or maybe there's another story I should tell about the camp in Mongolia. So we're sitting there in the yurts for 3 weeks. Beginning, nothing happens. We just go around and we look at things. And then in the last week, everybody wants to make a little bit of work. So everybody from the German side, they started doing their things. But our Mongolian friends, they all went into the mountain, and then they were together working on first the work of one artist. When that was finished, they would go another place and they would work together to finish the work of another artist. So a very different way of collectively making works, which was beautiful to see. And then one evening, we're sitting there, Zaya says, I understand now. So, what are you talking about? Well, you live in these cities, you live very close to one another, so you always try to kind of keep a little bit of distance between you and the other person, whereas we, everything is so far away, so we're very happy when we see each other. We can kind of stay very close. And, in those yurts, they, if there are more people, like 10 people sleeping in the yurt can kind of fit in there, not a problem. For us, this would be very uncomfortable. So, so there's a different way of, building community, working together. But Zaya's work also is very, I thought was very strong, because from her I learned how close everything in nature is to you when you're in the steppes. There's not much between you and nature. It's what you wear, and it's the felt of the yurt, and that's it. And then there's weather, and it can be strong. So everything is close to your skin. And what you see there in terms of pictures, she painted herself with ink and then rubbed herself off on paper. So there's an artist in Western art history that has done something similar, but comes from a totally different place. Here you feel it's very, very close. And she also had some video works about life in the steppes. And basically there are two kinds of kitchens in Mongolia. It's the white kitchen and the red one. So milk and meat. And this one that you see there, you see the two, and you're supposed to keep them separate. But this one here, you see milk and blood kind of go into, flow into one another. Very often you also have close-ups of a piece of soil, and you see some animals crawling around. There are lots of animals everywhere, especially little ones, grasshoppers and others that I've never seen or heard of. And also, all my Mongolian friends have told me, listen, the meat in the West tastes like paper. Here, they eat all these different fragrant pieces of grass, and they taste very, very differently. So the meat is also, it's almost medicinal, because they take in all these substances that kind of sustain you, maintain you as a human being. So there's a different philosophy about this as well. And that's what you see in her work quite clearly. So that is maybe part of the Tenger aspect, more of the, earth goddess. So I try to have works that would represent all these forces in that exhibition in a little way. Where's Weiser? Ah, yeah. That's his work. He's also a fantastic artist. he was invited to come and also co-curate the exhibition in Ulaanbaatar, and he was in Mørsbach and said, "Do you have some cardboard? Do you have some paper?" And he started making this meat grinder, and it's part of an ongoing series of meat grinders that he's made, and this is quite a strong image. He's always wearing them. During COVID, he was wearing a white hazard suit, white meat grinder, standing in a post-industrial landscape. So that's what can happen to you in Mongolia. You can literally be ground up. There's a lot of works by him, video works, that use very strong images. But I think they also come. I think in a way those figures, they also have that connection to the petroglyphs. There's this kind of same static moment. There's a way of, different way of dealing. Instead of horns, he has that meat grinder on his head. So to the right, that's Mungtsitsek Batmong Muji. I invited her because of those knots. And there's a lot of knotting in Mongolian culture, and they all mean something. It's like billions of different ways to knot things, and there was even a sort of like a code structure for sending secret letters during the Khan period. So when they sent secret messages, somebody would intercept, but they still couldn't read it. So in her case, there was a male and female aspect that she was talking about, and she made this field of male, female things floating back and forth, sometimes coming closer. I don't think I need to explain that more. It's self-explanatory. And the work on top is by the latest member of BLUESUN group, Karl-Heinz Jeron. He was an early internet artist, documenter, which was it, 92 or so, for his early internet works. He now lives in Greece, and so he comes from a Fluxus background, sort of sound and installation, information transformed. So he was walking around with his sound recorder, and he'd written a software by which the sound would be transformed into musical notes, and then you could play them. So he calls that oral landscape. So he was walking around exploring the oral qualities of nature, and then when we were in Ulaanbaatar, he decided to become a member of BLUESUN, which is quite nice, I think. So he made this, was preparing that. We also had invited this person on the right, who is Chinbat Orkhonbatar. He's a very professional musician in Mongolia, and he plays the everburi. That's an instrument that is curved like an animal horn, but it's really made from brass. And he was playing the tune that Karl-Heinz Jeron had prepared. And let me see if we have some more images. Nope. Maybe later. Let me go back. So this instrument, let me rephrase. For about 10, 20 years, people in Mongolia have looked at ancient music instruments that they knew from drawings, paintings, or something was found. So they try to recreate that and find ways to kind of use them, the old ways, but also new ways. So one day I get a phone call, and there was a woman, German young woman from Spain. She said, yeah, I'm calling because Joachim, my friend, he wants to come to Mørsbach. I said, okay, but how can he get there? I said, no worries, just tell him how to get to Bamberg, to the train station. I'll pick him up. Okay. Yeah, so he came because he wanted to meet Chinbad, because he bought one of those instruments from him. And then they were sitting there for 3 days, playing together, and then also playing with the Blaskapelle in Mürsbach later on, which was also a very nice moment. And then Joaquin gave a little speech before the impromptu concert and said, I'm very happy today that I have my own Everbury. There are only 70 of those in the world, almost all of them in Mongolia, only 3 in Europe. 1 in Paris in a museum and 2 here. So that was a beautiful moment. And it's quite interesting. It's more like a clarinet. That's how the thing works. Okay. And then I brought them to, of course, to Bamberg and to Vierzehnheiligen to look at our tradition. And it's a little bit of a pity that I only have this photo here. This is an old wooden box that Gerehu found in my attic. And he said, oh, can I have this? And I said, sure. So he was cleaning it, and then he made a painting on it. And here you see some sort of gnome or devil, but on the other side you see a bishop. And the bishop is wearing, what is it? He's wearing one of those famous mantle in Bamberg, in the Diözesan Museum, that are 1,000 years old. And so there was this inspiring moment between ideas about metaphysics in Franconia or in Europe and in Mongolia. And those are some moments from the camp. Oh yeah, that's Joaquin, that's Chinbad. And we even had two gears. And then I thought, okay, how do I get people there? It's kind of far away, nobody can get there. And then, I was talking with people from the Mongolian embassy, and also in Nuremberg has a Verein, Deutsch-Mongolischer Kulturverein, and their Vorstand came to visit me, and they said, oh, it's so beautiful, maybe we can do the Naadam Fest there. Naadam is sort of what Christmas is to us, is Naadam to Mongolians. It's where all the families come together. And Naadam literally means 3 male games, and it's horseback riding, shooting arrows, and wrestling. And so we had that on the island behind our mill, which brought about 1,300 people to Mürsbach.
Great.
Wow.
And Chinbad was one of them. Chinbad, I said, okay, I'll invite you, I'll give you a fee. He said, I'll bring my wife. I said, okay, bring your wife. And where do we see her? That's her. And that's her too. So she's a professional dancer. So she was dancing, and she was giving some dance classes as well. That was the opening with the Mongolian ambassador. So now actually this is the way from the airport to Ulaanbaatar. You arrive very, very early in the morning. Ich kann ja noch 2 Stunden reden.
Wir machen dann Feuer an.
Ja, genau.
Ja, das stimmt, ja, halt sind gefallene Drücker.
Einfach so ein paar, just a few, images for you to understand and see what Ulaanbaatar looks like. So this is Gandan Temple. It's the big traditional temple that's still there. It was, Frau Hiller, ich weiß. Schön, dass Sie da waren. Okay, schön. Tschüss. So very close to that, you have an area. Now they're building new hotels everywhere, and they're not exactly cheap anymore, but you still have gears there and then some shacks in between. But this is quickly changing right now. Also, here on the right, this is a square where there's a lot of, I think the Turkish embassy is right there, and it's huge. Turkey, Ottoman Empire. There's a strong connection between the Turk people and the Mongolian people. They've been living together for centuries, really. So there's a lot of mutual connection. We went to a archaeological site where they discovered stone stele with Turk language on one side, Chinese on the other, and then another one with Mongolian scripture. The Mongolian scripture is actually taken from the Uyghur cultures, which is also a Turk country, because Mongolia didn't have its own alphabet, and there were no written documents until maybe the year 1250 or so. Even the big story about the secret story of Mongolia, which describes how Genghis Khan transformed Mongolia, the only copy we have left right now is written in Chinese, and is actually in Beijing. So that's what we have to learn, how the Mongols built their own identity. I mean, this is a story that is at the core of Mongolian identity. But there you have this dervish as a sculpture in one square in Ulaanbaatar. So this is the main temple. You go inside, there's a huge Buddha statue. It's about 25 meters tall, and it looks really grand. But the story is, in the 1920s or so, this was taken down and given to Stalin as a gift. Basically, it was burned. So what you see there now is a replica, but it's good that it's back there. Yeah, we'll get to this later. Yeah, there it is. I mean, the image doesn't really tell you how huge it is. It's pretty. It's pretty huge. And that is the parliament building today. Genghis Khan, he looks like a mountain. And this is another really strong aspect of Mongolian culture. It's the Tsam dance that, again, they perform that once a year now. It's the Erlik Tsam. This is a dance, and in the exhibition I also showed a historic film about the last Tsam dance in the 1930s, I guess, before the Soviets kind of dismantled all this. But now it's again reinstated, and they do that. It comes from the time that Lama Buddhism came into Mongolia. So there were Lama cloisters, monasteries built in places that were holy to Tengur people. Of course, fight, monastery gets burned down, gets built up. It's like religious wars, basically. So that whole dance, and that dance is almost for an entire day, is about the story of those forces fighting against one another until in the end something gets symbolically burned. It's a little sculpture of a building, and then one of those Schädelsteine, those skull things, is taken to put some liquid that can be burned into the fire, and it kind of flares up, and that's kind of the end of it. But this is the inspiration that a lot of artists take from Lama Buddhism today. And why is it so important? I mean, this is Tengur. That's part of the Solombo, the symbol for Mongolia. It's the moon, the sun and the moon, and it's on top of that, of that sign, and that you can date back you can find examples 3,000 years back, and it's been always there, even during communist time. And that's sort of a shaman costume, the drum, and you should never see the face of the shaman. That's why this is there. Some more examples from Zana Bazaar Museum. So now the story why Lama Buddhism is important in contemporary culture in Mongolia today. As I said, I have to start differently. So when Genghis Khan built the empire,
When was this?
1250 around, they invaded also China, so China became Mongolian. The entire Yuan dynasty, 250 years, was Mongolian Khans that were emperors of China. So the Chinese remember that as the Yuan dynasty, and the Mongolians remember that as Han living in Beijing. And Beijing actually was a Mongolian foundation. So, but you know, Chinese culture was kind of cool, and they liked the refinedness of it. So there was a blending of Mongolian and Chinese cultures during that time. But this ended with the end of the Yuan dynasty, and then the Manchu came, yet another people, and took over both China and Han and Mongolian cultures. And they kept this alive until the Qing dynasty, basically in 1990, when the last empress really, when this collapsed, Mongolia saw a chance to kind of become independent, and were first trying to get closer to Tsarist Russia. The White Guards came and tried to support Mongolians against China, but that didn't work. And so then the Red Guards came in, and Mongolia declared independence in, now I'm lying, 2024 maybe? You tell me. 21. And then in 2024 it gained independence, right? Yeah. So that's the order of things. And then the communists helped to do that, but the price for that was that Mongolia was divided into Mongolia and Inner Mongolia, which is still part of China. Mm-hmm. Until the 1950s, they tried to keep this door open and have a pan-Mongolian policy, but it was impossible. So why is that important to art? Because before that, during Manchu times, Lama Buddhism was not supported. You could not, as a Mongolian artist, work with visual material. When it started to open up, there was a school, modern school by Mazar Sharaf.
Manzishar.
Yeah, exactly. Who created a new school based on Lama Buddhism, but was a republican movement in a way. So they used Lama Buddhist images to create a Mongolian identity in art. And that could only work for about 15 years until the communists came in and said, no, we don't want this because we want all the old things out. And it could not be done. You know, the art academy in Ulaanbaatar became very socialist. You could paint these men and you could paint horses, but not something Mongolian in that sense. Only in 1990, when the Soviet Union collapsed, he was still alive. That's a painting that is very important in Mongolian culture. Mm. It's one day in Mongolia, and when it's really bad. I didn't have time to kind of get a better imaging, but it's easy to find on the internet. You see everything from herding, from playing, from eating. You see animals do it, you see humans do it as well. So it's life in its fullest there. And it's a matter of identity for Mongolian modern culture to look at that. And that's the painting that Adam Schmierski invited to Documenta 12 alongside Nomin Bolt, who made a contemporary version of it. Because in 1990, when he was still alive, or no, one of his students was still alive, they refounded that Mongol Zura, Mongol style of painting, in the art school in Mongolia, and it became important again. So this is basically Mongolian Republican tradition and identity. That's why it's so important in Mongolian culture and in art today. I think that's important to know and understand why this is there. It's not pop, it's really a deep felt connection to one's own country there. And there's another installation that Nomin made with another sculpture, but that's a story I won't tell. You know it all. But it's quite impressive. No. This I found outside of the Gundam temple. I think it's bread that people give there, put there as gifts to the gods. But I don't know, when I saw this, I had to think of your work too. There's some sort of connection. That's what I was talking about before. And that's trash disposal in Mongolia. So we haven't talked about ecological problems yet. That's another important aspect. And it's a bit depressing because it's a huge country. It's, I think, 5 times bigger than Germany, only has 3.3 million people. But there's so many animals that the steppes are overherded. There are too many animals in the winter. Always animals die because of the cold, but also because there's no more food. And sometimes you see everything's kind of like eaten down to just a little bit. And so that's one aspect. The other aspect is Kashmir wool is very nice, right? I have a Kashmir scarf here. It's my favorite scarf right now, Mongolian, of course. Kashmir is so successful in the world that there's a Kashmir industry. The Kashmir goat was, every nomad used to have a few Kashmir goats in their herds, but not too many. Because this goat always knew where to find new food, so all the other animals would follow. Now there are pure Kashmir goat herds. The difference is they don't just eat the plant, they pull out the roots as well. So where the Kashmir goat is, nothing grows anymore. So that's a big problem. Trash disposal, another problem. Mining, another problem here, another problem. I mean, ecologically, it's a disaster. But what I found very strong in every Mongolian is that, it was, during Genghis Khan, it was forbidden to dig the earth. You couldn't do it. Still, people know about this. At one point, I was somewhere picking up a stone, and a friend said, "Thomas, what are you doing?" So, well, it's an interesting stone. Did you ask for permission to pick it up? I mean, this was a little bit of a joke, but I think that's the general feeling in Mongolia, that if you want to use something, you need to ask, and you need to give something back, also symbolically. But of course, the pressures of modern times are so big that if Mongolia wants to have a future, they also need to use their natural resources. But how can you do that in a way that is sustainable? And that's, I think, a big fight for Mongolia. They have to find a way to reconcile this. The only way why I'm moderately hopeful is because it's part of the Mongolian soul. So if they want peace, they need to make peace with that somehow. I don't know if I hope it works. But I think what we can learn in the West, we can learn that respect towards nature. I think that's what we can take home from that. Other than that, what didn't I talk about? Well, I talked about women a little bit. and I talked about trash. There is one story that's in the book that's coming out in April. Barut, the city in Brandenburg, they have a partnership with a city or a village in Mongolia, and they try to work together on sustainable waste management. So it's sort of a government program. And this was only made possible because there was a strong group of women that said, okay, we're going to do this. It's the eco-mommies, because they had no future in that remote part. So they said, okay, we'll take this on, and they were using trash to kind of make bags from it. They educated children in school. They put up waste disposal areas where you have containers, and they were making sure that those would also be recycled. So there's also that aspect, and it was only possible because there were some strong women. And talking about women, Mongolia has a foreign ministry, was a woman. The vice president of the Mongolian State Bank was a woman. Cultural ministry is a woman. So there are actually quite a few who have strong positions of power also, which is also something we could learn, that there's a different way of balance possible. Still, of course, main positions are still held by men, but I think in terms of balance, they might sometimes be even closer to that than we are here. Some more images from eating and sharing. And you can really see there's a lot of nothing out there, or something. And bones everywhere bones. You can't walk 2 meters and there are bones. A lot of... that's it. I think I talked enough.